So my life has been filled with a lot of realizations about things that are useless or misguided or not as important as I thought that they were. And I thought I'd take some time to go back through maybe a little bit of a list of some of those things and kind of recap my life. Because you start off and you're taught things, right? You're taught to believe things, you're taught religious stuff, you're taught whatever it is that your family thought was important, and you believe it. But then maybe you sort of open your eyes. Maybe you start to think, well, I guess things aren't really what I thought they were. And if you're progressive, then you're going to start to embrace new ideas, new ways of thinking. And you will become a different person than the one maybe your parents wanted you to be, or those who were formative in your childhood years thought you ought to be. So I was raised in the church, and my life started off with a firm belief in God and in all of the ways of living which were associated with conservative Christianity. Along with all of this was the culture of women wearing conservative clothes and maybe not working and being subservient to men. And, in my church, women were required to keep their hair up in a bun usually because it was seen as a sort of a modesty thing. Normally they would always wear dresses, and the dresses always had to be below the knee in length, stuff like that. People in my church would not use the internet. They would not have computers in their homes usually because that was seen as a path to worldliness. And so there was just a lot of stuff that I was taught to believe, and it was a mixture of theology and traditionalism and maybe some racism in there. When I was a kid, I was taught stuff like, that Indians still might scalp people, for example, in the United States. We're not talking about the ones from India, but the, Native Americans. And, as a kid, my mother would tell me stories like, if you go across the river into the reservation, they might get you and kill you because, that's what they do. The Indians kill white people, right? So I kind of had this idea in my head at that particular time as a child that the Indians was, still basically like the cowboys and Indians times from the, 1700s or something, that they were all just, out to fight, to fight the settlers or something, like that's not any way how it was, but that's what I was told. And, I thought, I guess I didn't really think too much about it, but I didn't not believe what I was told either. I was taught the old story that black people are black because they were the descendants of, I believe, Ham in the Bible. And Ham was the guy who saw the naked buttocks of his dad, and God cursed him because he laughed at his drunk father. And therefore, as a result of this situation, all of his descendants were cursed by God to be black, and them and all of their children would be black. And that was kind of like this story. It is a story. I'm not making it up. It's a real thing. It's been shared around. And so, I just thought, black people are fine, but they're black because, they're the descendants of Ham. And, it's a ridiculous story. But it's a story that I was told as a kid. And, I didn't have any real, reason to not believe it because I was just a kid, right? And so, I had all these beliefs that, if you watch television, you're going to hell. And if women are, not modest, they're going to hell. And people who have mixed marriages are, going to hell probably, like there's a lot of things that were probably paths to hell. And then I realized that there was a lot of argument in the church about theology, the differences between things like predestination and free will, the difference between Calvinism and Wesleyanism. And I won't go into all of those details here, but it was kind of basically like the early version of exposing myself to online arguments on Reddit. It doesn't matter what the content is. Once you have something that people believe, then you're going to also have arguments over whether it's right or not. And people will start to flame each other for having differences in perspective of any kind. And then even within the church, there would be arguments and debates and certain ideas that you're not allowed to have or talk about. And usually they were pretty small differences that would create these schisms in the church. But they were big in the ecosystem of that echo chamber where, these were big arguments about, what was or was not an acceptable way to look at theology and our Christian faith and all of that. And I guess there was this moment for me when I realized that none of it actually mattered. I realized that all of these stories and rules and teachings were just made up stuff. Like end to end, all of it was just people believing in things for no reason and then fighting with each other over the intricacies of that belief. It was no different than like people fighting over what MMO or what game is the best, or raging over some finer points of how you should do a build or how you should min-max in a game or something. Like, yeah, you can realize that it's important within that community until you realize that outside of that community, nobody really cares. Like, it's not important outside the echo chamber of a few people who have decided it's important for them. And then once you get outside of that, nobody cares, right? Like outside of the community of gamers, for example, nobody cares what game you play, right? It's none of it matters. It doesn't matter what your gear score is or anything like that. Nobody cares outside of that small echo chamber of community that is playing that game, but if you're just immersed in it, then you don't see that, right? You see like this is a big deal, like every time there's a game update or a patch or something changes, everyone's going to be up in arms about the devs not respecting the spirit of the game, or not respecting the players, or not respecting the lore, or whatever it might be. And that's kind of how it was with religion for me. I started to realize that I had been, I guess, duped by the people who raised me and the church and all of this stuff. And at the same time, I didn't disrespect the beauty of some of the things that I was taught. There's a lot of beauty in the Bible. There's a lot of beauty in tradition. There's a lot of beauty in all of that stuff. But it's also kind of like a video game. I could say there's a lot of beauty in Tamriel as I explore the Elder Scrolls. But that doesn't mean that it's not just a story. It doesn't mean that it's not fiction. It doesn't mean that I should say that I'm actually a worshiper of Stendar or Talos or something, right? Like it's not about taking things literally and saying, this is what I 100% believe. It's about saying there's beauty there, but it's also not meant to be taken literally. And that was a big turning point in my life, to realize that you have to give up all of that stuff and stop taking everything literally. Stop believing what you're told. Start thinking for yourself. And a lot of that stuff was just, not important to me anymore. All that religious stuff. But the crazy thing is, that was the first step outside of the echo chamber. It was the first step toward sort of an awakening, a realization that there's more to life than that, and I should have an open mind, and a lot of things people tell you are important aren't really important at all. It's just noise, because it's all based on stuff you can't prove. You can't, there's no evidence of any of it. It's just something somebody made up, and then they try to sell it as the gospel truth, and it's super important in that community. When you step out of it, then you realize that's not really what life's even all about. So I stepped out of the church, and then I started to focus on other things. And what would those things be? Well, those things would be, I want to have money, and I want to have a career, and I want to be part of that group of people that is able to sit in traffic and have their daily commute and do their 9 to 5 and all of that stuff, the career progression, the resume making, the trying to get a better position, the trying to get ahead in all of those kinds of ways. And I realized at some point in my life, probably far later, I realized that too was actually a complete lie, a complete trap. And it became apparent to me that life is filled with people chasing some kind of a treadmill. They're trying to get promoted. They're trying to get more money. They're trying to get a bigger house. They're trying to have more stuff. They're trying to do all these things so that they will be taken more seriously, so that they will be more close to a place of mastery or something. And then I realized that it's not about, life isn't about that, because while the economy is important and there's value in producing things and doing things to help the world move forward, when it comes to a philosophical approach to life, when it comes to what gives you a sense of value, what it is that gives you a sense of fulfillment and purpose and spiritual peace and all of that, you're not going to find that in material things any more than you'll find it in religion. Because all of the pursuit of those material things is actually just another form of religion. It's people worshiping maybe themselves instead of a traditional religion, but it's not about anything other than people trying to find purpose in things that are incapable of giving anyone purpose. Like, what rank I have at work doesn't make me a better person or a worse person. It doesn't give me anything that I didn't already have. It might be possible for me to make more money or to have, more stuff, but at the end of the day, that too is just a ledger. It's increasing numbers on a spreadsheet. It's not going to do anything for me in terms of making me more fit for heaven. It's not going to really matter, right? So when you realize that, like, all of it is just basically another game. It's another thing which is conditioned to make people feel like, if I get that bigger house, or if I get that promotion, or if I get a certain amount of money in my bank account or whatever, then my life will be complete to a level where I can be happy with it. It's just a trap. It doesn't work like that. And so then there's that moment of realizing, well, okay, religion isn't the end, and materialism isn't the end either. And there can be beauty in religion. There can be beauty in economics and consumerism and all of those things, but they aren't the end in themselves. They're just tools that maybe help us visualize some part of the world. They're maybe resources for helping us navigate the world, but they aren't a path to spiritual wholeness. They're not anything that is going to make your life better. Not really. And so, it's back to the drawing board. Like, where is the path of peace to be found? Where is the wholeness in life? Where is that, where is that place where we find enlightenment? If it's not material things and it's not religion. I mean, most people spend their lives completely defined by the pursuit of religious stuff, and if not religious stuff, probably some sort of materialism or ego, trying to be better than their neighbor or be richer than their neighbor. And so, that is really the two big things that were huge wake-up calls to put me on a different path and make me realize that life is something very different than what I once thought it was supposed to be. And so then that leads me to this place of saying, well, I'm not really worried about the pursuit of material things, and I'm not really worried about the pursuit of, trying to earn my way into heaven through some sort of religious perspective, right? Or following a faith. And then, what's left? Well, what's left is sort of a Zen, Stoic, maybe Taoist sort of a philosophy that all things are one, even if you don't do anything. Like, there's not any need for you to do anything to have a life that is meaningful. The universe doesn't revolve around you, and you also do make a difference in the world just by being you, just by being present. However you are, that's enough, and that is the end in itself. Just like looking at nature and you see a tree, and the tree is maybe a large tree, or maybe it's a small tree. Maybe it lives, or maybe it dies. And the truth is, none of it matters, because all of it is meant to be exactly as it is. The tree is meant to be. It's not meant to be more or less than what it is. And that's nature. Nature is always complete, even though it does not hurry. And that realization really, I guess, brought me full circle and put me in a place where, do I like everything that happens in life all the time? No. But am I capable of having peace with it anyway? And the answer is yes. Do I know everything? No, absolutely not. But do I know enough about how life works to be at peace with life as it is? Yes. And that's the realization that you don't really own the world. Your goal is not to be the king of the universe. Your goal is not to find that one singular path of truth that's going to be, a road to enlightenment. And people are completely full of all sorts of misguided beliefs and ignorance. And you really can't trust anybody, because people will almost always wind up believing in something. They're going to be evangelizing and pushing and trying to convince everyone else they have to believe it, whether it's a religious belief that they think is paramount, or some sort of career pursuits or something like that they're trying to use to flex or push or tell people, you need to buy into this, and if you do, then your life is going to be better. All of those people are pretty much of no value from a philosophical perspective. And I guess that leads to kind of the third realization, and that is that if religion is not the answer, and if materialism is not the answer, then other people aren't the answer either, because the path to peace lies within yourself. And if you focus on just yourself, to be responsible for what you're able to be responsible for, to do what you need to do, to have what you need to have, but not more or less, to live a life that's in harmony and balance with nature and with others, but also not to be too worried about what other people think, then that comes down to that realization that if there is no purpose, that is not already fulfilled. If we have meaning and purpose in our lives enough just by being true to ourselves, then when we interact with other people, we shouldn't have any expectations for them, and we shouldn't look to them as gods or as larger than life figures or anything like that, and that's a humbling thing. It's an interesting perspective, because you realize you can't look to anybody else and say, well, let me go find a guru that's got all the answers to everything, because in the end, there's no one in the world more qualified to answer questions about yourself or to give you guidance than you. You just have to trust yourself. And then that's a path of kind of loneliness. It's a path of solitude, because you'll realize quickly that most people don't have any interest in others unless they're able to in some way manipulate a narrative, if they're able to control other people, or if they're able to make other people think the way they do. Those are about the only things that make people feel valuable. And so then the outcome is just, you got to learn how to be alone. You got to learn how to be happy not having other people in your life. You've got to be at peace with letting go of that notion that there's something better out there, that there's people that are going to be more enlightened, or that you're going to find some sort of a happy valley where everyone is just loving and at peace and things. Like, even the people who think that they have it together, even like I could say that I have peace in my life, but I'm also not going to try to tell you that my way of looking at the world is super healthy to where I could go and be a guide for other people necessarily. Like, maybe it's possible that other people could gain some value out of my, perspectives. It's possible. But in the end, we're all kind of just alone. I mean, the best you're going to ever have is to be in the company of other people who don't want to change you, people who will respect your soul without trying to change it into something else. And that's, that's rare. And I think you can find it, but I don't think that you're going to find it in the masses. And so my perspective on life these days is, in terms of social life, I think once in a while you find somebody who's the kind of person that you would want to spend time with, the kind of person you'd respect, the kind of person who you'd want to have in your life. But those are rare and few. And even the people who are well-meaning usually wind up having some problems with the way they think, and it winds up being better just to leave them alone. And I don't want to change other people. I just don't want to be in a position where I have to always fight that problem of being around people who have a perspective that's different than my own, and then feeling like I've got to put energy into trying to navigate how to be in their company while also being true to myself. Like, it's easy to go through a day and not gossip about anybody, or not really think any hateful thoughts about anybody, and just be pretty much at peace. But then once you're around other people and they start to gossip, and they start to have their passive aggressive tendencies, and they start to have their maybe flawed worldviews, and they start projecting those onto those around them, then you have to start actively trying to, maybe disengage with things that they're doing or saying, and that can be exhausting. So it's easier just to be content with being alone. And so I guess those are the three great realizations, right? The first being that God is not the answer. And the second being that materialism is not the answer. And finally, that Other people aren't the answer either. And yet, the caveat there, the other side of it is, you can't be cynical about nature, because nature is not something to criticize. It's not something to hate or be angry at. You wouldn't go out in the woods and be angry at a bear for being a bear, or angry at the weather for being stormy or calm or too hot. Like, it just is what it is. It's not anything to fix. It's nothing to hate. It's nothing to worship. It's just something to accept. And then at the same time, there's a lot of beauty in it. You know, like if you think about things that are harmonious or peaceful or joyful, many times you'll think about being one with nature. And yet nature is filled with its own ignorances and conflicts and pain and suffering and all sorts of things, which are, you know, maybe not in a way beautiful. It's kind of hard to look at animals hunting each other or having no particular sense of morality, or just, you know, doing all the things that animals do. The circle of life, it can be pretty horrific in a way, and yet it can also be beautiful because it's just nature doing its thing. And that's how it is with people. It's how it is with philosophy, faith, all of the various comings and goings of the world. It's just part of nature. It's part of how the world works. It's how the world has worked since the basement of time. That's how it always will work. And so that leads me to the final realization, and that final realization is duality. It's that we can be appalled by something, we can disagree about something, we can say something is terrible. We can also say it's beautiful, and it's as it ought to be, and it's not something we need to fix, all at the same time. And we can have these dichotomies side by side, darkness with a little bit of light in it and light with a little bit of darkness in it. We don't have to try to fix ourselves or fix the world or any of that. We can just let it be what it is. Philosophically, we can be at peace with everything, even if we do make an effort to accomplish certain things in our lives because we feel like that's the right thing to do. I can try to have more money, and yet I can also be at peace with having what I have, whether that's a lot or a little. I can want social connections in my life that are meaningful, and I can also be at peace with whatever I do have in my life, whether it's meaningful connections or not. I can be an admirer of religion and philosophy and cultures that were imperfect, and I can also be an opponent of the things that I think are harmful. And I can understand that even if I want to say that people shouldn't be ignorant, ignorance too has its place and needs to be part of how the world works, because you have to have all different kinds of things to make a diverse world function in true harmony. Even the people who are not harmonious, the people who are chaotic, the people who are egotistical, they too need to exist because they are part of this story that we are all living out. So where does that leave us? Like it leaves us in a place where there is a lot to do in the world, more than ever can be done. There's more to see than can ever be seen. And yet, it is the circle of life. And in the end, all things merge together into one. And All things are fair, even if they don't seem like it sometimes. That's a lot of breaking down walls, though. It's a lot of going through things and experiencing things people think are important, and then realizing that they're not actually as important as people make them out to be. And it's a lot of thinking about people and believing that those people are important, and then realizing that the people aren't important either, as we once thought that they were. And then it's finally realizing that even ourselves, we are not overly important either, as we once thought we were. And that's going to produce a product of humility in our lives when we go through all of those steps and phases and come to an understanding that all things are well, and there isn't really any need to have an external system for interpreting them or explaining them. It's just about accepting the unity of all things and realizing that life is good, no matter what twists and turns it takes. And there is peace there, though. There is peace because we are finally able to rest. We're finally able to realize I don't have to find that perfect place. I don't have to find the pot of gold at the foot of the rainbow. I don't have to spend any more time searching. I can just let my life be what it is and understand that whether great or small, it is and always has been enough. So wherever you find yourself, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, hopefully you find peace in your daily life. I think that if we think that peace is something to find, we'll never find it. And if we think that peace is something for tomorrow, we'll never get there. But if we accept that we can have peace right now, then we don't ever have to look for it again. As always, thanks so much for watching.